Duplessis comes to power for the first time in 1936 to 1939. Shortly after, he is defeated by the liberal Monsieur Godbout. It was time for a change its population wanted secretly. And so, Godbout begins sweeping reforms which vexes the Catholic clergy, such as gives women right to vote, makes childhood education free. He also forces employers to directly negotiate with unions in certain cases. And in 1944, with the financial backing of the clergy, Duplessis manages a second victory in the province that he used underhanded methods which would be considered extremely illegal today. And so, a climate of repression and terror was instilled inside of the province. Duplessis did not hesitate to use his personal powers to financially bankrupt his ideological opponents. Within this state, the future fathers of Quebecois bikers were born, long before Harley-Davidson's exhaust had spread its fumes here. Uncanny as it may seem, I'm even skipping one half of what truly makes the entire history of Quebec's bike. For now, we shall contend, starting season 2, with our most pressing matter, going deep into the history of Canadian biker saga. The history no one can tell you because their history is locked, where no soulless content creator can write about, although not knowing anything at all about the province.
No!
I, your ally, the
Forger!
I will be your host today.
Crafty One.
Duplessis' return coincided with the post-war boom, the biggest economic boom in North American history. Parents of those future bikers enjoyed prosperity all of a sudden. It's a well-established fact. The war years had been brutal on the average citizen. War rationing and frugality were part of their everyday lives. They had suffered immensely. World War II was devastating to all of us. According to experts, half of Quebec's economic activities were in sectors that didn't exist 1 year before 1939. In other words, there was a doubling of their economic sectors, and Duplessis had inherited all of it.
He was at the helm.
The average French Canadian was struggling, and Duplessis was in the pockets of the businessmen and clergy. He never sided with domestic laborers, not even once. Anyone with a common sense knows working conditions at that time were a complete joke.
Well, don't tell them everything, Forger.
I won't, and we don't need you here, you devil.
J'ai été ministre dans le gouvernement Trudeau. Avait participé à une conférence d'hommes d'affaires aux États-Unis. Et un de ces hommes d'affaires lui avait raconté qu'ils avaient envoyé un émissaire, un de leurs collègues, voir Duplessis à Québec quand il était au pouvoir pour protester contre une augmentation des impôts sur le revenu. Et que Duplessis lui avait répondu, il y a deux manières de développer une province. La première, c'est les ressources naturelles. Je vous les vends pas, je vous les prête pas, je vous les donne. Et la deuxième manière, c'est une main-d'œuvre docile et à bon marché. L'Union nationale verra à ce que ça se passe comme ça.
Hence, children who were to be future bikers of the 60s grew up in childhoods remembering their parents telling them of severe economic hardships from World War II and the religiously fanatical Prime Minister.
Et notre religion constitue un trésor que nous devons conserver jalousement. Un trésor que nous devons enrichir pour ainsi y a moyen de l'enrichir en le conservant pieusement et en n'oubliant jamais que c'est notre devoir les plus impérieux de le posséder.
Those children had either seen it themselves or heard it by their parents in a very personal and life-shattering way. Going back to the story, by 1945, the war ended and Duplessis was in full control a second time. The 1950s would be an important step in these future bikers' families. The majority of the rural exode would have occurred by then. These families would have held very strong Catholic beliefs and practiced them very fiercely.
L'Église, et avec la volonté de l'Union nationale en particulier, contrôle le domaine de l'éducation, contrôle le domaine des hôpitaux, des services sociaux, en lui imprégnant évidemment sa vision catholique des choses.
C'était une époque où les subventions de l'État étaient discrétionnaires, donc l'Église avait besoin de l'État et vice-versa. Et à ce moment-là, on a vu ça jusqu'aux années 60.
To give you a picture of their size, by 1950s, these future bikers would have been between 5 to 10 years of age and would be among the 2/3 of Quebec's population living in major cities. In fact, between 1951 to 1961, there was an increase of children attending elementary schools of about 66%, which would be the best example of what we would call today the boomer generation. Their everyday lives was subjugated by what we view today as the patriarchy. Duplessis had various aspects of their lives managed by the clergy, such as education, hospitals, and social services. But by the latter years of 1957 and 1958, something happened. People were getting tired of it. The province's landscape had been completely transformed by uncontrollable economic forces. Nobody could stop the massive amounts of new wealth generated, as well as the consequences of having so many new children come to the world. And with each new life breeds new desires, new needs. Those needs are specific to that generation, and in this case, the historical context was need for freedom, and much of it. Which breeds the question, is there such a thing as too much freedom? Well, the answer to that question might lie in the reaction that flows. A revolution everybody wanted, coming to
Quebec,
but not so
quietly.
as the name suggests. La Révolution tranquille, quiet revolution. Upon Duplessis' death in September of 1959, politicians bow province-wide to outcries for freedom. And by 1961, Jean Drapeau proposes to modernize for the next century. He builds a brand new downtown, moving away from the old port, and he modernizes the city's
Road networks for our future bikers.
And this is where our story starts. Flower power, 1970s. 70s kids,
Freedom!
partying, hippied. By 1969, the Quebec government had completely abandoned Catholicism. It legalized abortion, decriminalized homosexuality, and morality was no longer policed by the police. Divorce was made easier. Even television showed comedians mocking religion openly. The children of Gaspésie and Abitibi were now living in major cities, and they were having their freedom the way their parents had wished they had theirs. These kids were in their teens and early 20s, and one of these enterprising kids we have none other than Eve
Apache Trudeau.